All right, everyone. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We're glad you could join us tonight for our Flathead Conservation and Seedling Nursery Seedling and Care webinar. We're very thankful to those of you that could participate with us. We will just go over a few things as we get started. My name is Jessie Walters. I am the Conservation Program Manager for the Flathead Conservation District. We are just going to go over a few housekeeping items before we get started. If you are having any connectivity issues during the webinar tonight, we would encourage you to just shut off your video so that you're just joining by audio. That will help you possibly get a better feed for the program. So if you're having any trouble with that, that's one item that may work well. Please keep yourself muted at all times. We will be allowing multiple speakers, so we'll have the option for them to be able to join in, but it allows others to potentially be heard. So if you are able to just ensure that you keep yourself muted for the duration of the program. If you're not sure where to find that, it's down in the bottom left corner of your screen. There's a little microphone and you can adjust it that way. If you are muted, you'll see a little red microphone with a slash through it to ensure that you are muted. We'll go through at the later during the question and answer session, you'll be able to unmute yourself and ask questions if you would so desire. The video tonight is being recorded, so just a reminder that we will be recording it, and then it will be posted on our website in the coming days where you'll be able to watch again, or if there's someone you feel would benefit from it, we'd be glad to have you share with others. During this webinar tonight, the chat option will be disabled for the primary program and presentation. We will enable that at the end for a question and answer session, but we will have you unable to enter into the chat just to avoid too many distractions, as that can be a little bit disruptive if we're having a lot of chatting going on. So if you do have any questions as we're going along, just save them till the end. And then at that point, we will have a question and answer session, and you'll be able to enter questions into the chat, which I'll see as the host, and we'll be able to articulate those questions to our presenters. Or if you'd like to verbalize your question yourself, you can raise your hand in the little hand raise reaction section, and then we can call on you and you can unmute yourself and ask your question. When we get to that section, if you're curious about how to do that, if you go to the bottom of your screen, there's a little on the far right, 3 dots that says more. If you click on that at the top, it'll say chat, and then you can bring up the chat and enter comments into there. But as we mentioned, currently the chat option is disabled for now. So I'd like to introduce our speakers tonight. We're very grateful to be joined by 2 presenters to share the information for seedling care. Our first presenter will be Ashley Matson. Ashley is the operations specialist at the Montana Conservation Seedling Nursery, which is run by the Department of Natural Resources and Conservation. So we're glad to have Ashley here tonight.
Hi, everyone.
Thanks, Ashley. After Ashley, we will be joined by Samantha Tappenbeck. Samantha is the resource conservationist at the Flathead Conservation District. So Sam will share after Ashley.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining.
Thanks, Sam. Just to describe a little bit for the format that we'll follow tonight, Samantha and Ashley will present. That portion will be about an hour we'll take for their sessions. Once we're through with the presentations, once again, we'll have a question and answer session. So again, just you can jot down questions or make a note of any questions. And then at that time, we'll open it up. You're welcome to enter them into the chat, and I'll read the questions from the chat to direct to Sam and Ashley. or again, just do the little hand raise reaction, and we'll call you by name as it appears on the screen. And then you'll be able to articulate your question. And with that, we'll turn things over to Ashley. Thank you so much again, everyone, for joining us.
All righty, let me share my screen. All right, okay. Let me know if there's any technical difficulties. Perfect. I'm gonna hide everybody's camera view so I can see my presentation. All right. So thank you everyone for coming out this evening. I'm really excited to get more information out there about the Seedling Nursery and what we do and how you can acquire seedlings from us. So like we said, my name is Ashley Matson. I manage the business and sale transactions here at the Conservation Seedling Nursery. I started this past September, and when you place an order, email, or call us, it is me who you are talking to. Unless I forward your question or inquiry to a different staff member, it's me. So that's a way you can put a face to a name. And I am going to cover how the nursery currently operates, but I will say that we are going to be updating and potentially changing some things for next season, and I will highlight those when we get there to the potential changes. And let's see. So I'm going to cover everything in the way I think makes the most sense. It's a lot of information, so feel free to ask questions at the end, and I'll do my best to answer them. You can also reach me at the email address mtnursery@mt.gov, or you can call our phone and leave a voicemail and I'll get back to you. And it just might take me a little bit. Okay, so a little bit about us. The nursery was established in 1927 and was originally located at the University of Montana campus in Missoula, and then it moved to the DNRC campus in 1952. We have 6 permanent staff members and 2 to 6 seasonal staff members at a given time throughout the year. We are a business owned by the state, but we are a sole proprietor. So our seedling sales and any sort of funding that we can apply for is what we operate on. 90% of the plants we grow are from wild collected seed that we collect ourselves. If we can't collect, then we will purchase seed from a supplier who can provide us information on the source of where the seed came from. And we would love to collect seed on your property. If anybody has a good seed source, feel free to reach out to us and we'll see, we'll organize a time that we can come out and see you all. And our seedlings are for conservation projects only. So we sell our seedlings in bulk for verified conservation projects. And the selling in bulk helps us prevent from competing with other nurseries. And we have 4 greenhouses, and we are currently building a 5th greenhouse thanks to a grant that we received from American Forests. They are a really awesome organization, and we produced over 744,000 seedlings this season between contracts and general sale orders, which I will explain those a little later on. And we had over 700 customers this season. Just to touch on where our funding comes from a little bit more in our strategic growth here at the nursery. We have applied for a variety of funding opportunities, and they have either been approved or we are still waiting to hear back on their approval. We have a goal of producing 1.5 million seedlings, and we would also like to update our infrastructure. Things are pretty old out here, and the more infrastructure we can update, the more seedlings that we can produce at an affordable rate. And I will touch on this a little more towards the end of the presentation, but the acronym MTNSN, that's the Montana Native Seed Network, and that's a new venture we are starting this year. Okay, so what is conservation to the nursery? Projects focused on protecting species from extinction, maintaining and restoring habitats, enhancing ecosystem services, and protecting biological diversity is how we define conservation. And to put it simply, the way I describe it is it's the practice of protecting, restoring, or maintaining an ecosystem, the biological services it provides, and the species that inhabit it. And I'll get into this more when we cover the conservation verification checklist, but some examples of conservation are post-fire restoration. That is our #1 priority. Windbreak and shelter belts are a common conservation practice that our seedlings are used for, as well as wildlife and pollinator habitat. And also Christmas tree farms are considered conservation, which I thought was really interesting. So what is not considered conservation? Nurseries cannot buy our seedlings at a wholesale rate for retail purposes, and planting cannot be for aesthetic purposes or landscaping. While this is beautiful, this is not considered conservation and does not qualify for our seedlings. So there are 2 different ways to acquire seedlings from this nursery. There is the general sale and contracts. Contracts are for customers who want 1,000 or more of a species, and it is processed over a 3-year period. So the first year, we determine, what seedlings you want us to grow, what the seed source is. Ideally, the seed source is coming from your property, but we can try other outlets to see where we can source that seed from so that it's appropriate for your habitat. Year 2, the seedlings are growing. So you're just preparing your site, getting things ready for your seedlings arrival in year 3. And that is when you can hit the ground running once it's workable and get planting on your seedlings. Space is limited if you are interested in a contract, or if you and other landowners want to come together for a contract. We are full for 2024, but we are still accepting contracts for 2025. The general sale is for customers wanting smaller quantities of seedlings. This is a lot of information, so just taking it one step at a time, I think, is the best way. And the sale opens in September every year, and it closes in May. The contract orders and 175 seedlings can be picked up in the fall, but all other seedlings we discourage picking up in the fall. It's better to pick them up in the spring because those seedlings will get moisture from spring rain and runoff, and they will be able to set roots before the big freezes come in the winter. So it increases their odds of survival to plant in the spring. So then all orders are placed by hand by me in the order they are received. So email and mail are the ways that we get our orders. And email is the best way to place an order because you will get it in a lot faster. It might take me a week or more to get back to you on your order because there's just so many in the inbox. We get hundreds the day the sale opens and then hundreds in the following weeks. So it takes some time to go through them all. If you mail your order, it's going to take a couple days to get here, and the inventory is going to be drastically different by the time I get it, especially during the early days of the sale. So I always recommend emailing. And I think if you don't have a scanner or strong technological skills, the conservation district or extension offices in your county can help you get that order placed. And we get a lot of phone calls, so we really appreciate your patience. So I think the best place to start first is the conservation verification checklist. This is what is going to determine if your planting is considered conservation. If any of these checkboxes apply to you, then you qualify. If your planting isn't described on this checklist, briefly describe it in the box with a couple lines, and then we'll review it, and then we'll let you know if your planting is considered conservation or not. Okay. So after you determine that your planting is considered conservation, the next place I think to go is the inventory, because this is going to tell you what we have in stock. And this is going to change. This is a definite change. We are going to restructure it so it is more user-friendly. It's very difficult to read, and I'm going to do my best to describe it. So let me see. I'm going to try and use this laser pointer. Hopefully it comes through okay. So another factor that I'm going to mention also that is going to change is the new customer order minimum. It's a potential change. It has not been approved yet. And right now, new customers have to meet one of these minimums. You either have to order 150 bare root, 144 small containers, or 45 large containers. And we want to create, we want to make our seedlings more equitable to people and easier to access. So that is why we are trying to work on changing this policy so that everyone can order as a returning customer. And this is the absolute minimum that we can sell seedlings in. So to go over the inventory, it is organized by type. So bare root, small container, or large container. So here we have our bare root. This is Carigana. It is size 2-0, which stands for 2 years old. The seed source is the nursery. I don't have an elevation for it, but it would be our elevation here in Missoula. It's just not filled in. And then we have 20,000 in stock when the sale opened. It's bare root, and it is $1.39 for one seedling. So that's not the price for the minimum, which is 50. It's 50 times $1.39. And I'm going to show some examples on the next slide of the different seedling sizes so that you can get an idea. These are organized like how forestry seedlings are produced. So for example, amber maple, it's an S20. That stands for 20 cubic inches of soil in the pot. And that's how you can read all of these numbers. So S10, 10 cubic inches of soil. R10, 10 cubic inches of soil as well. It's just a different style pot that the seedling is grown in so that the roots do not grow through the styrofoam block that these others are grown in. And then S27, same thing, 27 cubic inches of soil. Oops, okay. We did used to produce more bare root in the past, but the demand has grown for containerized seedlings. People see more success, a higher survival rate when planting containerized seedlings instead of bare root because they have soil around the roots, so it allows for less of a transplant shock. We also reduced our bare root operation because the deer were eating 20%. And then it's also very labor intensive and weather dependent to harvest. So these are some examples of seedling sizes. Like I mentioned, bare root, that first number indicates how many years old it is. And so down here, we have our bare root. This is either buffalo berry or Carigana, I can't remember. But this is a bundle of 300 to 400 bare root, and this is how the seedlings will arrive on the delivery truck or if you're picking up here at the nursery. Excuse me. Here I'm holding a S10 size seedling and an S27 seedling. So you can see that, you know, it's over double the size of the S10. And this is a comparison of the S10, the S27, and the C175, so 175 cubic inches of soil. This is how they come packaged. There's 9 in a tray. These are ponderosas. And then I just want to note how tall these poplars are. This is the large 175 poplars. And then the small containers are grown in styrofoam blocks, but we remove them, bag them, and then they are boxed. So, picking the right seedling. You want to match your planting location to the closest seed source and elevation. On the inventory, there will be different species that either say east or west. That stands for this seed source comes from east of the divide, so people east of the divide should be planting this seedling, and same for west. Eastern seed sources can go west, western seed sources cannot go east. The western seed sources are not hardy enough to handle the wind, hail, sleet, all that weather that out east gets. The eastern seed source can go west, but it will grow slower because it is hardier. So it's taking more time to pack on those nutrients and growth so that it can withstand high winds, low temperatures. Elevation is, I think, the most important factor when planting your seedlings. High elevation seedlings can go low. Low elevation seedlings cannot go higher than roughly 400 feet is what is recommended in the forestry industry. So here's just a little example of lodgepole pine, the size, 2 different seed sources, and 3 different elevations. So after you determined your planting is considered conservation and you qualify for our seedlings, you've looked at the inventory and selected the seedlings you'd like. Now it is time to complete the order form. And the conservation checklist, I just want to add, is in the order form packet. The inventory is a separate document. The order form with the conservation checklist, where you'd like your seedlings delivered to, that is all one document. So here is a little mock-up that I created. This is where your contact information will go. This is really important, especially if you're a returning customer, in case your email changes, your phone number changes, or your address. I can get in contact with you if, for example, you ordered 10 seedlings instead of 24, or we're out of stock of something. It just helps me get in contact with you. So here we have the different species that were ordered, their seed sources and elevations, the size seedling, and the number ordered, the price per seedling, and then the total cost. I'll get into delivery options on the next slide, but if you want your order FedExed, that fee would be calculated in this box, and it is 19% of the order total, or a $15 minimum. After you send me your order, I will send you back an invoice with payment instructions. So here is an example of an invoice. It has the customer's name, the customer's address, what they ordered, species, size, seed source, price per unit, quantity, and then the total. And what is not pictured here at the bottom is it'll have the total of all of your seedlings and then any payments that have been applied towards that balance. Our contact information is listed on here. It has our main address. This is our main building here on site. And this is where check payments will get mailed to, order forms get mailed to the 2705 Spurgeon address. Has our phone number and our email, and our fax number is going to be removed because I don't even know if it works. So on this upper right-hand corner, there is some important information. This is your invoice number, the FA. And this is how I track payments. When you send me a check, I'm going to write that invoice number on it so I can trace that check back to the order it's being paid for. And then this number here, the CO number, that's your order number. And you're going to need that when you go pick up your seedlings because they're all going to be boxed, as you saw in that previous photo, with the order number on it. If you are picking up here at the nursery, Missoula will be listed for the county. It'll say local pickup. If your order is being shipped to, say, Flathead County, that's where it would be. And then it would say nursery vehicle for the shipping method. So After you complete the order form, the next page will indicate where you want your seedlings to delivered to. So you can pick up here at the nursery, always. Fall is only for large size seedlings or contract orders. So you will most likely pick up your order in the spring. That's what this box here indicates, is that you're going to come here and pick up. Another change that we will make is we are not going to have this box, because you place your order in September, October. By the time April comes around, you probably forgot your pickup date. And I've received so many orders that it's hard to keep track of them all. So it's better to just have people contact me in April or March and let me know when you're going to come get the seedlings. And the week of April 1st, you'll be notified via a newsletter the day that the seedlings are ready for pickup. So this year it's April 12th, tomorrow. And for delivery, you'll check the delivery box and indicate the county that you want your seedlings to go to. The week of April 1st, you'll also be notified in that same newsletter when the seedlings are ready for pickup, when they'll be delivered to that county, and then also the county agent will contact you. For Flathead County, we have been sending out postcards, but that is something that may change in the future because it's actually very labor intensive to get those addresses and all that information compiled, especially during a very busy time here. But we'll see. So FedEx, this is our least preferred method. FedEx orders can be lost, they can be damaged. Our truck is refrigerated, so the seedlings stay at an optimal temperature. With FedEx, it's not climate controlled. They might be in a distribution center where it's also not climate controlled as well. And then, like I said, the fee for FedEx is 19% or $15 minimum. FedEx will pick up on a Tuesday of your choice, and then you should receive the seedlings by the end of the week or in a couple of days. If you choose FedEx as an option and you did not select a shipping date, I will reach out in March and ask you when you'd like those seedlings sent out. So that is the short summary of how orders are placed at the nursery and how you can select the correct seedling for your planting site. A new venture that we are working on is the Montana Native Seed Network. We are working with partners to collect wild seed and then produce that seed here at the nursery. So we will establish plots with different priority forbs and grasses, and then we will start collecting that seed and selling it to the public. Currently, we're in phase 1, so we are going to be collecting seed this summer, establishing our plots, and then we will have 1.5 acres in production. Phase 2, we will continue collecting seed, propagating, and cultivating here at the nursery, and we will have 5 acres in production. Phase 3, we will have 50 acres in production, and we expect to be selling seed through contracts and the general sale. So how to stay informed, because there's a lot going on here. The newsletter is a really good way. You'll get a newsletter in August. It will describe the upcoming sale in September, any important information you need to know. I'm hoping to produce a demo on ordering so people can share it amongst themselves and make the ordering process a lot smoother. September, a newsletter will be released on the day of the sale as a reminder. February, you'll get a reminder that we might still have seedlings in stock. Here's important information you need to know for the upcoming delivery season. April will be all the delivery and pickup information. You can sign up anywhere on our web pages. This is our website link, and you'll see a blue box that says to sign up for our newsletter. And then, of course, updates will also be posted on our website. And then my request is we are conducting a survey. We want your feedback. This is a QR code. You can take your phone camera and hover it over that square either now or after the recording has been released. You'll get a little link pop up. You can click on it. The survey is like smartphone compatible, so you can just do it right then and there, or you can email me and I'll send you this link here so that you can complete the survey. One lucky winner will get a $50 credit to either a fall or spring order for next season. And I would like to thank all of you for listening to this presentation and attending. It's really awesome that so many people are passionate about conservation and are doing these practices on their properties and public land and getting, nonprofits and other organizations involved to help further conservation goals here in Montana. This is a photo of our first greenhouse that was seeded. It was filled on February 6th, and then I took a photo today of what it looks like now. Now I have to figure out how to unshare.
Great. Thank you so much, Ashley. That's great information. Just a reminder, if you've joined us late, we'll do a question and answer session once the presentations are finished. And now we will turn it over to Samantha Tappenbeck, Resource Conservationist from Flathead Conservation District.
All right, that's me. So I want to thank Ashley for a really nice presentation. I learned a lot just sitting through that myself, and just recognize and appreciate how much work goes into the operation of that nursery down there and how much coordination it takes. And I am now going to transition to discussing sort of the planting and care aspects of doing a conservation seedling planting. And so hopefully you guys can see my screen. Jesse, are you seeing the presentation screen? Okay.
Yes. Yep. It's not taking over the full screen, but it's there.
Hopefully it has now.
Yes. Yep.
Okay, great. So like Jesse said, my name is Samantha Tappenbeck. I'm the resource conservationist for the Flathead Conservation District. So if you are a landowner in Flathead County joining us this evening, then we are your local conservation district. And like I said, I'm going to go over kind of the basics of seedling planting and care. That's why we're calling it a 101 webinar. But I do just want to tag on to some of the information that Ashley provided and just provide some locally specific information about the program that we offer through Flathead Conservation District. And so that is called our Conservation Seedling Program. And like Ashley mentioned, the nursery down in Missoula, it currently sets a minimum order size for first-time customers. However, if you want to order below the minimum order size, so maybe you're a smaller scale landowner, or maybe you're planning to do a project that just doesn't require as many seedlings as that minimum order size is, then you can place an order through your local conservation district, because we pool our small orders together so that landowners can get around that minimum order size and still be able to order from the Montana Conservation Seedling Nursery. That being said, some landowners just prefer to order through their local conservation district, even if they're established customers at the nursery. I think some people just prefer to come in, meet in person, work with their local conservation district for assistance and consultation. We can provide information to you about your soil type on your property, the kinds of trees and shrubs that would work well in that soil type and be appropriate for your location, and then also to meet your conservation goals and provide some guidance on best practices and management for those plantings. So I think some people just prefer to, kind of do it the old-fashioned way and come into their local conservation district to place their orders year after year. And we really look forward to those opportunities to work directly with landowners to help plan their project. So like Ashley said, they open the inventory down at the nursery in Missoula in early fall. And then you can place orders through early spring, and the inventory is reserved on a first come, first serve basis. And so whether or not you order directly from the nursery or through your local conservation district, that is the case. The local conservation district is not making any money off of the orders that are placed through the district. We are simply like a pass-through organization. So if you come in and you'd like to place a seedling order, we help you put together that order and then send on your order with payment to the nursery. But we don't have a stop for that payment along the way. It just gets passed on right through to the nursery. And then importantly, as Ashley emphasized, these plantings are for conservation practices only, not for landscaping. So a planting project begins long before actually planting your seedlings, right? So it's important to kind of step back, do some brainstorming, some research, and develop a plan for your planting. So, the first thing you really want to do is identify your goals. So, are you trying to improve pollinator habitat or wildlife habitat on your property? Are you planting a windbreak to protect your soils from erosion and possibly create energy savings for your home? Are you doing a reforestation project on your property, or potentially like a stand improvement project? So those might be the goals that you really broadly define for the planting that you have in mind for your property. And then it's important that you start doing your research. So, identify the resources that you need in order to achieve those goals that you've identified. And then start to educate yourself. And this is where coming to your local conservation district can be really helpful. We have a lot of resources that we can provide and hopefully connect you with those so that you're able to, educate yourself and empower yourself as a landowner to do that project and accomplish your goals. Importantly, in the planning process, you want to consider your budget. And I don't just mean the financial budget, I mean also your time as a factor in setting realistic goals for the planting. It's going to cost you time in the short term and the long term. And there's going to be some expenses for doing the proper site preparation and then actually placing the order and then managing that planting over time. I find it very helpful to, in that planning phase, take a look at your property as it stands right now. So, what does it offer in terms of existing plant community? What do you have for topography on your property? Do you have direct sun? Do you have indirect sun? Do you have prevailing winds from one direction? What's your soil moisture like? And what's the condition and texture of your soil? So even just stepping back and looking really broadly at the features of your property, no matter how small or how large, I think can be a really important first step. And then I find it very helpful to actually sketch it out, identify those areas that do and do not meet your land use goals. Are there areas with good habitat? For example, are there established plants like shrubs that provide nesting and forage habitat for birds? Where are your prevailing winds coming from? Draw it on a map. Are there areas of erosion on your property? Or if you have water flowing through your property, is there any eroding stream bank or any goals that you have specific to habitat adjacent to those water features? So all of those things, I find it helpful to just kind of sketch out on paper. And then when it comes to actually planning your project and preparing your site, there are many, many factors to consider, and I'll get into those a bit, especially when it comes to the site preparation. But, you know, in selecting your site, you want to think about like what plants need, right? So, you know, back up to your first elementary school lesson about photosynthesis and what plants need. We know they need sun in order to make food for themselves. They need moisture and they need nutrients. So is your property able to provide those things in its current condition? Consider your soil and the condition of the soil on your property and the factors that affect fertility, such as drainage, organic content of the soil. Is the soil very compacted? Are you aware of like a long history of land use prior to your ownership that maybe would have impacted the structure of that soil over time? Is there any potential herbicide residual in your soils? That can be important to identify. If you know that information, it's important to consider as part of the planning process. And then another thing you want to think about is competition. So what kind of vegetation is currently growing on site, and how will that existing vegetation impact and compete with your new planting, with those new little seedlings that go in the ground? Weeds are really aggressive. If you're from Flathead County, you know that very well. They're very good competitors and they need to be treated prior to doing your planting. So generally speaking, favorable sites for planting have high soil moisture, little competition from existing vegetation. They have some protection from wind. They have soils with organic matter content in them, so lots of good, rich organic matter and nutrients. They have the proper pH, so like the soil acidity, good aeration or appropriate soil texture for the kind of planting that you're looking to do. And then the ability to catch and hold on to moisture is important as well. And soil texture has a lot to do with that. On most planting sites in Montana, water is the greatest limiting factor. And I say that relatively because Flathead County has a lot of water. We have a ton of flowing streams, a ton of standing water bodies, very close access to groundwater in a lot of locations in the Flathead Valley in particular. We have a lot of moisture here in Flathead County, and it is why weeds thrive and competition can be extremely limiting from weeds for those new plantings. So when it comes to methods of site preparation and treatment, you know, that's going to vary a lot based on the existing vegetation in the area. Areas with infestations of noxious weeds may require multiple seasons or years of persistent treatment and control before doing your planting. I mean, if you don't want to waste your time and your money, get those under control before you consider doing a planting in that area. So when you're selecting a method, consider those factors. And I think it's important to recognize that that process of planning and preparing for a planting often ends up being a compromise between what's ideal and what's practical for you. A lot of folks, myself included, get really excited about planting season, you know, and have big goals and want to place huge orders for seedlings. And then those seedlings get delivered and it's like, well, somebody's got to put all these in the ground and take care of them. And it can be a lot to bite off and chew. So if you can recognize that up front and sort of tamper your expectations to a place where you're balancing the ideal and the practical, that's a good place to land. All right, so assuming you've done your planning and placed an order for seedlings, I now want to pick up with the process of delivery and seedling pickup and planting. So as Ashley mentioned, seedlings are delivered from the state nursery in Missoula by refrigerated truck to your county. So in Flathead County, the seedlings are delivered to the DNRC Northwest Land Office in Kalispell. And that's over, if you're not familiar with it, that's over just south of Glacier High School off of Timberwolf Drive. And it's a real nice, easy to access location. When the truck comes in on seedling delivery day, we unload and organize the seedling orders for drive-through loading and pickup. It's a big day. Thousands of seedlings are delivered on that one day and picked up by landowners on that single day. We do not hold seedlings past 4:30 because there's just not adequate storage to do so and ensure the protection of those seedlings. So you got to come and pick them up when you get the notice that they're going to be delivered. And we usually designate a window of time, typically from 1 p.m. to 4:30 p.m. so that it gives us time to sort and organize and have those orders ready to go to be as efficient as possible to move those thousands of seedlings out to their ultimate destinations. So you plan to pick up your seedlings that day, and then you want to plan to minimize that interval between drop off of the seedlings, your pickup, and planting. So ideally between pickup and planting, that interval is 2 to 4 days. Ideally, you'd get them in the ground the same day, but it's often hundreds of seedlings and that's just not feasible. So 2 to 4 days is a good window to shoot for between pickup and planting. The optimum short-term storage temperatures for seedlings coming from the nursery is 32 to 45 degrees. So this is really important. You want to make sure that you're storing seedlings in a cool, humid location in their unopened boxes or bundles until they are ready to be planted. So you never want to allow the seedlings to freeze or expose the seedlings to temperatures greater than 60 degrees Fahrenheit unless they're going to be planted immediately, because they're very sensitive to changes to drying and to high temperatures. So a couple photos here from seedling delivery days past. You can see that, as many of you know, the weather in April can be quite variable. So come prepared for that. If you're picking up seedlings, make sure you bring the right vehicle for the job. That seems obvious, but you wouldn't believe some of the vehicles that people show up with to pick up seedlings. So if it's a large order, make sure that you have adequate space for that order. And then when you pick up your seedlings, you can lay large container plants down if you're going to be traveling at highway speeds. That'll keep them safe. It'll protect them from being jostled too much. They're safe to lay down and transport in that way. Importantly, if you don't have them covered by like a canopy, or if they're inside a covered trailer, then you want to bring a tarp to cover the seedlings. You want to tarp them if possible, but you want to be very careful in doing so. I mean, the ones that are fully contained in a box, it's not going to be an issue. But as you can see in the photos, some of the larger containerized stock, they're growing right up out of the box. And so the tips and the terminal buds of some of these species are exposed during transportation. So you want to make sure that they stay covered and protected from wind and heat and high speeds on the highway. But you want to make sure that when you tarp them, you're not breaking off terminal buds from those plants, especially conifers, because that'll kill the plant. Horse trailers, motorcycle trailers, enclosed truck beds, those are good options for transporting seedlings. It keeps them covered and tight and secure. So once you pick up your order, those seedlings are officially in your care. And again, you want to try to plant those seedlings as soon as possible. So if you ordered seedlings through the Montana Conservation Seedling Nursery, they're typically delivered to Flathead County in mid to late April. That ends up being ideal planting time in most circumstances. The seedlings are still dormant. The soil moisture that time of year is high. There's a lot of moisture in the soil because the snowpack is melting. Soil temperatures are appropriate for planting. They're starting to warm, but they're not overly hot so that they're drying and losing water and moisture rapidly. So mid-April is a great time to receive those seedlings and get ready to put them in the ground. Conservation plantings are successful if the site is properly prepared and if healthy seedlings adapted to the site are used. And this is where ordering from the nursery is so great. I mean, because they've got, locally sourced, adapted stock to the conditions here in Montana where they were sourced from and grown. Transplanting, nonetheless, is a really major shock to live plants. And so you need to really take great care to protect the seedlings and insulate them from that shock of transplantation as much as possible. So just quickly to clarify what I mean by dormancy, plant dormancy is basically a plant's strategy to prepare its soft tissues for freezing temperatures, dry weather, or water and nutrient shortages. It's basically a way of dealing with harsh conditions. And certainly in Montana, we have very harsh conditions that plants have to contend with. So during dormancy, they're conserving energy. The metabolism of the plant slows down. And that dormancy period, both going into and coming out of dormancy, is triggered by duration and thresholds of sunlight and temperature. Those thresholds and those triggers are variable by species. It comes down to the specific life history and plant phenology for that species. Some species may require a certain amount of days with temperatures above a certain temperature. Some plants may require a certain amount of sunlight per day in order to be triggered. Some plants may require a combination of those two factors, and so it's variable. But what we do know is that in the fall, plants hibernate, they go to sleep, and they go dormant, and in the spring, they wake up and they start preparing for growth. So at the beginning of the dormancy process, plants are moving sugars and carbohydrates, those products that they created from photosynthesis, from the leaves, the solar panels, down to the roots to nourish the plant and get ready for the winter months so it can survive those harsh conditions. It's better to plant seedlings while they're still dormant. There's less transplant shock if they wake up in new soil rather than being forced into strange conditions that they're not used to. They tend to put on new root growth before they break bud, which helps them get established. And so transplanting them while they're dormant will prevent a lot of that transplant shock and trauma to the plant and ensure greater survival. So if you cannot plant right away, a few things to consider. You never want to plant into frozen ground. Even if you manage to chisel out a hole, you could end up with air pockets in the hole. Plants don't like air pockets around their roots. So you want to make sure that the soil is no longer frozen, that you've got the adequate moisture and soil temperatures, and then you want to try to let the small container plants thaw before planting. Don't attempt to break them apart because you will shatter that tissue of the plant. Some of the guidance from the seedling nursery directly is that you don't want to unpackage bare root seedlings if you can't plant right away. So the roots for the bare root stock are packed with damp sphagnum moss and can be stored in a cool, shady spot for 2 to 3 days. If you have to store them for more than 2 to 3 days, you can stick a hose into the bale of bare root stock and re-wet the roots every 2 to 3 days. Make sure that they stay cool and moist. You can tilt up the bundle and make sure some of that excess water flows out so they're not sitting in standing water. You just want to keep them moist and protect that very sensitive tissue. So you don't want to store them in standing water. That can cause root rot and you'll end up with more problems than it's worth. The small containers will likely arrive frozen, like the soil plugs will still be frozen. But once you pick them up and take them home, don't put them in your freezer at home in order to like postpone planting. The nursery freezers are controlled at very specific temperature and humidity conditions. Your freezer at home is not. If you do that, if you stick them in the freezer at home, then there's a very good chance that your roots will be severely damaged and the plant will die. So you want to keep them in a cool, dark place. If you can't plant them soon after pickup, those small container seedlings could go in a 37-degree refrigerator for longer storage if you must, but it's not ideal. The large container seedlings should be stored upright and outside. You can water them 2 to 3 times a week if they're thawed and can't be planted right away. You can put them in an unheated, buffered place like a garage or like a crawl space, somewhere where it's going to be cool and protected from direct sun and wind. If you want to do that, if the temperatures are going to drop to like the low teens, like really cold, freezing conditions, that's the case where you want to put those into a protected area. You don't want to put them in a place where, if you're not able to get them in the ground right away, you don't want to put them into a place where they're going to start to wake up during storage. You don't want to bring them out of dormancy if you can prevent it until you're ready to have those plants in the ground. You just have to do what you can to protect them while they're in a sensitive state, which is in transport and in containers, to protect them from the conditions like extreme climate conditions, heat, wind, severe cold. You want to just keep them in a very controlled environment. So that being said, that's the recommendation from the nursery, specifically, with the bare root plants. I do recommend following that strategy because they really know what they're doing down at the nursery and they know their inventory and their plant stock very well. Sometimes, best laid plans don't go accordingly. So if you are planting bare root plants this spring, but you need more time to get them planted, you can consider healing them in. And that's a strategy which is essentially a temporary planting technique. So healing in the plants gives them a little bit more protection from the weather and can give you more time for site prep or to wait for good planting weather. Healing them in is going to prevent the plants from breaking dormancy early, and it keeps the roots moist until you can get them planted for longer periods of time. So in the spring, plants can remain healed in for up to a month. In the fall, this technique would allow you to overwinter your plants as long as they are planted early the following spring. If your ground is still frozen, you can use a wheelbarrow or a 5-gallon bucket and mulch, like sawdust or sand, something to go in over top of them and protect them from the conditions. If you have multiple bare root plants, they can be kind of loosely piled together when healed in and don't require the same spacing as a permanent planting because it's just a temporary storage for them. So when you're ready to plant and your permanent location site prep is complete, then you simply uncover the plants and rinse their roots before planting, and they're ready to go in the ground. All right, so when you are ready to do your planting, you want to assess the conditions at that moment in time. You want cool, moist conditions in your local climate, in your weather for the day. So ideal temperatures for planting are between 33 and 50 degrees Fahrenheit. If it's going to be over 60 degrees or windy, it's best to just stop planting and wait for the right planting conditions. So it's not so fun, but overcast and rain are great for planting. So those are good days to plan your planting if you see it in the forecast. And, you know, if we talk about the timing of seedling delivery being mid to late April, there's a pretty good chance of ideal planting conditions around that time. Sun, wind, and heat are bad news. Just wait until you have the ideal conditions for planting. You're going to get dirty. You're going to get wet. You're probably going to be cold and cursing yourself for ordering so many seedlings, but your seedlings will be happier, have better survival, and be able to withstand the transplant stress much better if they have ideal conditions during planting. So there are lots of tools available once you are ready to do your planting. There's planting bars, sharpshooter type shovels. There's hodads, which are for like very efficient tree planting practices. You can use a soil auger, and that could be like a gas-powered soil auger, like I've got a picture of there on the screen. You might have a tractor-mounted soil auger. But importantly, when it comes to digging holes, you don't want to pre-dig your holes. So you don't want to go out the week before or even the day before and pre-dig the holes for all, 250 seedlings that you're going to pick up the next day. It might seem like that would be the more efficient thing to do, but the problem with that is the soil in the hole will get compacted when you tamp that soil down during the planting, and it'll inhibit root growth. And so the soil that goes back into the hole will also likely be dry if you've pre-dug your holes. You don't want that. We want moist soils to protect those roots. So you want to dig holes at the time of planting, and then use the tools that will help plant efficiently but prevent soil compaction. So I love a gas-powered soil auger. I mean, you can do a very efficient planting project with that. It works really well with the right bit size for the various container sizes that the Conservation Seedling Nursery has available. You can adjust that accordingly for the seedlings that you ordered and make sure you're putting the right size hole in the ground. And then also the beauty of those augers is that it's not pounding a hole in, it's lifting soil out. So if you do it right, you can pull the soft, loose soil out and create a hole that has not been compacted severely for when the plant is ultimately placed in the hole that you dug. You do not want to put water in the planting holes immediately prior to the planting. That can also lead to excessive soil compaction when the soil gets tamped down around the roots. Another important consideration is actually handling your containerized seedlings. So when you're ready to plant, you want to make sure that you're carefully removing the seedlings from the containers. Some people will try to actually like pull the large seedlings right out of the pot, and it'll break the stem right in the middle, or it'll cause just excessive damage and unnecessary damage to that very delicate little seedling. So instead of trying to pull it out of the container, what you want to do is massage the sides of the container so it loosens whatever is bound to the side, and then turn it upside down and pull the plant and pot away from each other gently. And that is what Ben from the nursery is demonstrating in the photos on the screen. So that's the way to do it without damaging the seedling in that container. All right, so when it comes to the planting, several considerations I want to go over. So again, for digging the holes must be large enough to accommodate the root system in its natural form. So you just really want to make sure that you don't bunch the roots at the bottom of the hole or fold them so that they're hooked towards the surface. And I've got a couple of illustrations here that are from the seedling planting and care guidelines that the nursery has available. So you can see like various scenarios of improper and proper planting and setting of those root structures. The planting depth is also important. So at time of planting, for the bare root seedlings, they don't have a soil plug, right? So you want to identify the root collar on the bare root seedlings, and that's the soil surface line when the seedling was in the nursery beds. It's usually pretty obvious. You can see a distinct change on the stem. And then you want to plant the containerized seedlings so the surface of the plug's peat soil is a ½ inch below the final grade. And so if you then cap the container soil with native soil, that can also help to prevent rapid drying of the plug, which is another consideration. So I find those graphics to be really handy. I find the actual implementation on the ground to be trickier. So you have to get a feel for it. You have to make sure you're not cramming those roots in there, and you have to make sure that you're getting it to the right depth, or else the transplant shock and the trauma of the planting is going to be too much for the plant to withstand. And then importantly, you want to make sure that you're backfilling those holes gently, and so that you don't introduce any large air pockets around the roots. And you can do that by just really gently tamping that soil down around the root structure so it's even, and you're not crushing it, and you're not just like loosely dumping it in there. You want to make sure you get those air pockets out of there, because if there's air pockets, once the plant recovers from the initial planting, it's going to be exposed to that air, and it's significant enough to dry out the roots, and if it's severe enough, will kill the plant. All right, so when it comes to water, it's really important early on that you give them adequate water. So again, we're trying to minimize trauma, minimize the stress from transplanting. So at the time of planting, it's good if you can give them a good long drink, like 1 to 2 gallons of water for each seedling that you put in the ground. Native species they're adapted to our growing conditions in Montana. You know, west of the divide, we have cool, wet springs generally, but then we have a hot, dry, droughty summer, right? I mean, you can count on hot, dry conditions for the full duration of July and August. But the native plants are adapted to that. They've evolved in this climate. And so, once they get established and to the point that they can, withstand those conditions, they're fine. You're not going to have to water them all the time. They should be able to take care of themselves, but water is really crucial for seedling establishment. It's especially important for root development and early growth. So in those early years, you want to do regular irrigation for the first couple of years, the first 2 to 3 years, and that will greatly increase the survival and greatly increase growth rates. If you don't give them water during those first 2 to 3 years, the plants, they'll just be stunted in a lot of cases. I mean, they might look like they're still alive, but they'll just stay in a very small, undeveloped state, and they'll never like fully establish and grow at their natural growth rate. So it's important to do that early on. And periodic deep watering is better than frequent light watering. So keep that in mind as well. Again, once it's established, you won't need to water native vegetation as often, but it's very important to water while they're young and becoming established. If you can give them 2 to 3 gallons twice a week in July and August, that would be great. That can be very difficult to do for a large scale planting. Strategies like drip irrigation, where you can hook it up to a timer and control the duration of watering and the volume of water in sort of a hands-off system. So you're not dragging 200 feet of hose around and individually watering your seedlings. That can really help. So keep in mind the ideal kind of volume and frequency of watering when they're young. And then seasonally, you want to taper off watering starting in like late August or early September, because you want to allow the seedlings to harden off for the winter. So you want to stress them out a little bit, basically. If they're too happy, if they're too green and succulent, when that first hard freeze sets in, then that might kill them. It might just, it might be too much for them to withstand. They're too comfortable. So you want to harden them off. If you have not properly prepared the planting site, when it comes to watering, you're just going to be watering the weeds or the nuisance grass or the existing vegetation that's there. Seedlings are not good competitors for water and nutrients. So if you have established vegetation there that you have not removed prior to planting those seedlings, you're going to waste water, you're going to stunt or you're going to kill your seedlings, and you're just going to create a nuisance management issue for yourself. And let me tell you that I speak from experience on this. It is very real, and that site prep is so important, especially here in Flathead County, where we have very aggressive weeds. All right, when it comes to fertilization, generally it's considered unnecessary and not recommended. After the first year, you can do small applications of slow release fertilizers with equal parts nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus. That can help aid in plant growth. I really urge caution on this, though. Fertilizers are powerful chemicals. Seedlings are very susceptible to chemical burn. So you want to make sure, if you're going to do that, that you follow application rates very carefully. But generally, if you're planting native species, again, they're adapted to the growing conditions in this area. They should not need chemical synthetic fertilizers. I would say instead focus your efforts on good site preparation and then managing competition around your seedlings. You also can't go wrong with mulch. And then if you decide to mulch around your seedlings, you'll also get other benefits. You'll get organic matter as that mulch is decomposing, and then it also releases nutrients that are beneficial for the growth of your plants. All right, so it is so critically important to protect your seedlings. Some of you probably know this very well. I'm just going to go over some of our wildlife hazards that can be very damaging to seedlings. I'll start with rodents. Voles can be extremely damaging to plants. So they're little rodents, and they make quick work of tender little seedlings. They'll come along and they'll girdle the bark off of a young seedling and just instantly kill it in that one foul swoop. There are some strategies you can use to try to deal with voles. Plant tubes can help, and I'll point those out to you in a minute. I've got a picture of some plant tubes. Those are like solid tube structures, usually made out of plastic. And those can help with voles because you can kind of work them down into the soil 2 or 3 inches around the plant so that voles can't get direct access to those tender little stems and girdle them. Some people try wrapping tinfoil around their seedling stems. I think that's kind of hit or miss in terms of effectiveness. Importantly, when it comes to voles, you want to keep the area around your seedlings mowed. If it's an area that's like an open field where you've got a lot of grasses, that's a great habitat for voles. You'd expect to find them there. If you keep the area around your seedling mowed, it helps manage the competition, number one, with that vegetation, but it also keeps it open for predators like hawks who are looking visually for those small rodents to feed on. And so if an area has been mowed around a seedling, then a vole is very vulnerable in that area and they tend to avoid it, as opposed to an area with densely growing vegetation right up to the edge of that stem. That's just asking for voles to come along and destroy your seedling. So let the hawks help you and your planting. And then there's also, of course, deer to be aware of. Large ungulates in general, deer, we've got whitetail, we've got mule deer, and then we've got elk here in Montana, and moose. And they can be extremely damaging to seedlings because large ungulates like deer and elk and moose are browsers, which means they're coming along. They're not necessarily grazing on grass. You know, they're not like a horse or a cow. They're browsing on vegetation that's growing like eye level for them. So they're looking for the tender little leaves that grow on trees and shrubs. That's what they're honing in on. And so brand new seedlings are just perfect for ungulates to come along and mow down and just nip the terminal buds right off of those plants. So it is just so important that you protect those tender little seedlings from browse until they're old enough to withstand the browse pressure. So we're talking about like greater than 5 years old. They need to be protected from browse. They also need to be protected from antler rubs. So bucks and bulls will come along and mark their territory and rub on trees during mating season. It also helps them shed their spring fuzz on their antlers as they grow those antlers in the springtime. So trees like aspen and cottonwoods, when they're young, they're like prime candidates for rubs from antlers. So be aware of that too. You want to protect those seedlings from browsing, and you want to protect the actual stems from rubbing antlers, because those can very quickly girdle a seedling stem and kill it. And take this from me firsthand. This is a picture of a planting that I optimistically did on my property. I live right by a stream and I planted 50 red osier dogwood. This was one of the sites where I did a planting, and I thought, oh no, there's plenty to eat on my property. There's tons of forest. There's snowberry everywhere you look. Why would they bother my seedlings? And so I didn't protect them with cages. They came along and they absolutely destroyed those seedlings. It's like they've got a sixth sense for seedlings that you worked very hard to plant, and they will find them and they will browse them down to nothing. So again, very important that you protect those seedlings. Here you can see some cages around seedlings, and I touched on that a little bit when it comes to browse protection, but what I really want to highlight in these photos is how important it is to protect your seedlings from competition from existing vegetation. So I've got 3 photos here. The 2 photos on the left are what not to plant seedlings into. You really want to make sure that you prepare that area and you clear the existing vegetation, grass, weeds, get it out of there. Make sure you control it as that seedling is trying to get established. The seedling nursery has customers call them all the time, confused about, why their seedlings died. They'll be like, I put them on a drip line. They'll send photos, and then you can see that these little seedlings are just being choked out by the existing vegetation. And then if you're watering that area, all you're doing is watering the existing vegetation. You're not able to get that water to the seedling because it's just not a good enough competitor yet. So you might consider using something like weed mat. So here you can see some good examples of individual weed mat protection on these seedlings. You can also see, I don't know if you can see my mouse, but you can also see these green plant tubes here. Those are the plant tubes I was referring to. So those are a solid plastic structure. They're not like a piece of fencing or chicken wire that's, open, but protecting from browse. They're actually like an enclosed solid case that's going to enclose that plant. And these ones are nice. They actually provide like a little bit of a greenhouse effect too. So that can be beneficial, and you can kind of drive those down into the top couple inches of soil, and that can give you some added protection from voles. Now, it's not the prettiest looking planting when it's young like this, but these kinds of protections, including, weed barrier fabric or weed mat, whether that's strips or squares like you see here, that stuff is going to allow water to pass through, but light cannot pass through. It's also going to smother out the weeds and the grass that are growing in that immediate area around the seedling. So again, the plant tubes are beneficial for protecting the plant from girdling from voles, that sort of thing. You get a little greenhouse effect from it. And then you want to also consider, depending on what species you're planting, you might not go for plant tubes. You might instead go for cages and support stakes to protect those. Those could be cages like you see here in the photo on the top right. Those are more appropriate for like small container conifers. And then this is just a bamboo stake holding that in place, and you can zip tie it on there to add some extra stability. You might also just consider a big roll of chicken wire that you cut pieces of and stake down with whatever stakes you have available. Maybe T-posts or bamboo stakes might work in that case. And then alternatively, or in addition, you want to put up perimeter fencing, and that's going to be your real protection from large browsing ungulates. You want to make sure you've got some kind of perimeter up to protect them from direct browse from ungulates. So I love mulch and all of its benefits. I just want to kind of highlight how beneficial mulch can be for seedlings. So it can help control weeds. It reduces evaporation from the soil around the roots. So it's really going to help maintain that soil moisture that is so critical for getting these little tender seedlings established. And then it also allows air and water to pass through, but not light, right? Woven weed fabric is generally best. You can also use wood chips, bark chips, straw, composted sawdust. That can also be good. Grass clippings, you generally want to avoid. It can have residual herbicides in it if you use things like Roundup, that sort of thing. It also tends to attract rodents, so that's not good. You don't want to put grass clippings around your seedlings as mulch, but generally, you know, mulching is good. You want to mulch, whether you use fabric or biodegradable natural mulch, that's up to you. No matter what, you're always going to have to manage it in the future. That woven weed fabric, it's plastic. At some point, you're probably going to want to pull it up once those plants are established. It can be a bit of a mess if it's left uncared for. So no matter what, you're going to have to manage this planting, but mulch is good. Consider mulching. And to do that, keep in mind that mulch should be no deeper than 3 inches around these seedlings. And you want to create a donut around the base of the seedling, not a volcano, if that makes sense. You want to make sure that any water that falls on top of that mulch is going down to the seedling, not running off the sides. You also want to check for cracks in soil as it begins to freeze, and then fill that in with additional mulch or soil just to protect those plantings further. All right, so I think at this time we can move into questions. I hope you guys have some questions for us. Before we do that, I'll just give a shameless plug to please connect with us, especially if you're a landowner in Flathead County. We would really like the opportunity to connect with you, tell you more about our landowner assistance programs. A great way to find out more information about what we do and what programs we have available at Flathead Conservation District is to visit our website and just kind of peruse the information that's there. That's flatheadcd.org. You can also give us a call. I encourage you to follow us on social media, and then definitely encourage you to sign up for our e-newsletter. It goes out once a month and it's called The Local Dirt. It goes out on the first Monday of every month, and it's got information about available programs and upcoming events like this one. We host workshops and then have a number of resources that we make available to landowners, and you can find out more by getting in touch. So thanks so much, and I look forward to discussing and answering questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Sam and Ashley. That was awesome information. And just if you've been participating as a viewer, thank you guys so much for joining us. And as we've entered the question and answer session, you are welcome to write a comment into the chat, or if you'd like to raise your hand with the little reaction button that's in the bottom of your screen, where there's 3 little dots on the right that say more, and you can, at the bottom of that little list, it'll say reactions, and you can raise your hand if you'd like to voice a question yourself. Please feel free, and we'll call your name and you can unmute and ask your question. We did have one question come in from Trish, who's watching. She's asking, where do people get the tubes for protection?
Yeah, we usually direct people to forestry suppliers. And if you just Google that, forestry suppliers, you'll see a website where they have an incredible inventory of different tube and cage sizes to meet whatever needs you might have in terms of different seedling sizes. And They've got those solid structure plant tubes, and then there's different options for cages and stakes as well. So I usually direct people there. Forestry suppliers.
Great, thank you. We had another question about the pickup date, which is scheduled for April 18th, which is next Tuesday. That is correct. Someone had asked a question about whether it was changed to the 12th. Not for Flathead County, I believe. Is that right, Ashley? We're still on for next week, a week from today, April 18th.
Yep, April 18th.
Great. And just a reminder, the truck will be coming early, but the pickup window is 1 p.m. to 4:30 p.m. And we cannot hold, that's another item, we can't hold the seedlings at the site. So if for some reason you're not able to pick it up yourself, please designate a neighbor, family member, or someone to get them for you. And then you could glue them in on the care to get them, keep them safe until you're able to get them. Someone has asked, can you please suggest local suppliers for protection, tubes and HODAD as online shipping from forestry suppliers is prohibitive? So there was a question about any local suppliers.
Yeah, that's a good question. Ashley, I don't know if you know any local suppliers in Montana. I mean, frankly, when it comes to like, you know, putting a cage around your planting, I usually just recommend people go to like Murdoch's or Home Depot or Montana Fence Company if they're having like a sale on stuff, you know, go and stock up. In terms of tools, I hope someday at the Conservation District to have like a tool rental option for landowners. Not everybody wants to go out and buy a whole bunch of tools for planting if they're only going to be doing it once. We don't have that yet. It might be in our future someday, but there are tool rental suppliers. If you're local to Flathead County, there's Midway Rentals, there's Big Fork Rentals, and a number of like large equipment dealers that I believe have tool rentals as well. In terms of like the HODADs, I'm not sure where one might rent that. And I could understand how it could be cost prohibitive to order such a thing from forestry suppliers. Oftentimes, you know, it's more cost effective to order in bulk, like if you're going to be ordering a bunch of plant tubes or something like that. But one tool can be like as much in shipping as it is for the actual tool. So I don't know where you might find the like shovel type or HODAD type tools, but I have rented tools like gas powered soil augers from Midway or Big Fork Rentals in the past. So you might check that out.
Yeah, I don't know of anywhere locally that sells seedling protector tubes. We used to sell them, but we stopped this year. We were ordering ours from TerraTech, so I don't know if maybe their shipping rates are more affordable.
Okay, thanks for addressing that, Ashley, because that was another question, if the nursery still had browse protection or tubes. So thanks for that. Yeah, and just to Sam's point too, I know that, you know, a lot of the local hardware stores and suppliers have that tall deer fencing pretty affordably. Sliders and Home Depot and other suppliers have that deer fencing and T-post material as well.
Yeah, I know some people use chicken wire for their seedling protectors.
Yep.
Works well to protect from antler rubs too, like just putting a little hoop of chicken wire around. It can be good.
Great. Pete had a question about his order, but we can follow up with you afterwards, Pete, that he said he didn't get an invoice, but we can double check that. If you want to write your last name, Pete, in the chat, and we can double check your order connect with you. We're the only ones who can see that if you'd like to do that. Or call the district, call us at the Conservation District tomorrow would be a great option as well. Or the nursery. I think Ashley can answer that as well.
Yep.
Great. Well, that's all I'm seeing for questions from the chat. Did anyone else in the audience have any questions?
I got a question come through in the chat directly from Dr. Rafi. Are large containers in boxes for transportation or just the pot?
They are in the pot, and then 9 of those pots are in a plastic tray. They are not boxed this year.
Okay. Okay, Pete, thanks for your information. We'll follow up with you for that tomorrow. There was a question I think we got at the office recently for the large container seedlings. That I think I remember reading that they can be kept outside potentially longer and watered.
Yep, they can be kept outside in a place where they're protected, and then they can just be watered as they're drying out.
Okay, so somewhere probably cool and shaded, not frozen.
Yep, somewhere shady would be great. You don't want them getting, beamed by the direct sun and drying out, or up against a wall where they're getting direct sun and it's getting even hotter. Yeah, someplace cool, and then check them frequently to be watered.
Great.
Definitely not a long-term solution though. I mean, those containers do nothing to insulate those plants like the ground does. So, you don't want to leave them overwintering in a container where they're going to freeze solid.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Trish Reynolds says, everyone's been very helpful and informative. Thanks, Trish, for the good feedback. Well, great.
If anyone has any like personal experiences that they would be interested in sharing, like for a planting that went well or that went wrong or anything that they learned, we sure would like to hear it and welcome that as well.
Mm-hmm. And the nursery is always looking for pictures of plantings, so feel free to email us your photos.
Great. Ashley, for the new seedling program where you're looking for folks or sites to collect seed, is that something people should just contact you directly if they have an interest in that?
Yep. Yeah. Email the nursery or give us a call. And yeah, we can collect seed, to produce trees and shrubs, or maybe potentially if you have like good grass and forb populations, we'll take all the seed.
Ashley,
Great.
do you have some kind of like quality assurance that you do when you go out to collect on private land? Is there any assessment of disease or anything like that?
Yeah, I haven't personally been out to any properties to collect seed on. I've just done it at our wild sites. But yeah, if we notice any sign of disease or pests, we're not going to want to collect seed from those plants. And then all of our seed goes through a germination test, so we know the germination rate and the viability of the seed as well.
I want to come take a tour of the seedling nursery. Do you ever do public tours?
Actually, we were talking about that today, about mentioning folks coming by. So we are open to the public. You can come and walk around the grounds. A lot of people walk their dogs out here. And we are also working on organizing at least 2 tours for this summer. So I will post that on Facebook. The DNRC Facebook page is where you can find our updates. It'll be on our website as well. But Facebook is probably the best place to see those kind of like spur of the moment events.
Great. Let me see. We had a question. If the site has not been prepared when the seedlings are picked up, will the plastic weed barrier work for weed abatement? So I'm assuming maybe to sort of smother what's there.
Yeah, it's a strategy that we have used for plantings. I mean, sometimes it's just not feasible to get out there and physically clear that area, but if you can do anything to knock back the existing vegetation before laying that weed fabric down, that's going to help. So even like, you know, using your shovel to like scrape up whatever sod you can from that area, it's better than nothing. It depends a lot on what species you have there competing. I mean, we've done plantings in areas of heavy reed canary grass infestation, and we have fought the reed canary grass even through the weed barrier fabric. It will just punch right through. It has no problem. Whereas other less aggressive species might be more effectively smothered. The weed fabric is not a perfect solution, but it does help.
Okay. Great. All righty. Well, I think that's it for questions coming in, and I don't see any hands raised. So thank you so much to all of you who were able to join, and you're always welcome to contact us at the Conservation District if we can be of help, or an extra resource for this program or any of our other programs. And Ashley as well is very accessible and very quick to respond to questions. So we really appreciate her. And thank you so much, Ashley and Samantha, for all the great information. I really learned a lot too. And a lot of folks are writing in and expressing a lot of thanks for your time and information. So thank you so much to you both.
Thanks everyone for joining.
Yeah, thank you.
All righty. Take care. Have a good night, everyone. We'll see you on next Tuesday. Thank you.